I have returned from my vacation, and just in time to learn that the Canadian government has spent in excess of $300,000 to determine whether or not Hearts of Iron 4 is a threat to national security. Can you imagine the sheer obscene levels of excess wealth that must be available in Canada for the government to go, yes, we shall spend more than $250,000 on a Hearts of Iron 4 mod? I mean, God help us. Imagine if there was some sort of incredibly immoral and deeply abhorrent practice going on in Canada right now, whose only sole singular defense is saving money for the Canadian government and taxpayers. I mean, if that was true, holy heck, that would be ghoulish beyond belief, and seemingly proof positive that the Canadian government are actually literally evil. But that is neither here nor there, as such a thing could not possibly happen, right? So, let's return to the topic at hand. Federal government worried extremists are recruiting through video games. The video game in question being again Hearts of Iron 4. Whose audience of 30 to 40-year-old autists are famously politically illiterate. Last year, Trenton, 22, a year from Michigan, logged in to play a new version of one of his favorite online strategy games. The new fan-made modification called The Fire Risers looked a lot like the original Hearts of Iron 4, a wartime strategy game, but it was set in an apocalyptic version of the United States in 2022. Considering that this 22-year-old from Michigan logged in to his favorite online strategy game, I don't think that was Hearts of Iron, but details. Trenton was able to play as the Patriot Front and the Atomwaffen Division, both far-right fascist militias. At the time, Trenton didn't know those were the names of real-life neo-Nazi and white nationalist organizations. Canada has even designated the Atomwaffen Division as a terrorist organization. I thought it was something some guy had made up his in room, said Trenton, whose real name is Zach Vizero, of course, who asked that only his first name be used for this story. Trenton said the Fire Risers glorify the perspective of Nazi and far-right positions and has an incredibly cult-like glorification of Trump. In-game sequence features troubling graphics including descriptions of soldiers killing left-wing protesters. It feels like a far-right power fantasy, said Zach. Zach didn't know the Canadian government was worried about that game too. A briefing note from the Federal Integrated Threat Assessment Center, or ITAC, shows the government is concerned games like Fire Risers are being used by violent groups to fundraise, indoctrinate, and possibly even recruit. Okay. Well, let's have a quick look at this mod, shall we? So, you can indeed play as the Patriotic Front and Atomwaffen, along with other National Socialist groups, in the mod, which is indeed basically a mod showing the collapse of the Western world, in large parts also due to a massive pandemic. But I wonder, could there be some other elements that we are, for reasons unbeknownst to anyone, complete mystery, that would not at all be explained in my, the alt-right playbook video I released a couple days ago, specifically the sections about entering into the debate with a narrative set? Something like that? But could there be something we overlook, like, I don't know, Union of America, say no to hate, say no to bigotry, or maybe the American People's Liberation Army? Could there be some sort of concern for radicalization in that direction, maybe? No? Not gonna mention that? Alright. What about if we wanted a little bit spicier? A little bit of an extra edge to the matter. What about the Black Liberation Army? Currently in development. No, none of these are a concern, are they? Mysterious. That note obtained by the IJF, which is this particular page here, the Investigative Journalism Foundation, which is an excellent title for a site and an article that does none of that. Through access information, said the Fire Risers contains standard accelerationist narratives popular with right-wing extremist groups. Oh yes, because the world is in a very stable state at the moment, isn't it? And while playing games doesn't imply a user can or will resort to actual violence, it has speculated players will very likely be exposed to violent extremist imagery and narratives, and potentially members or sympathizers of real-world extremist groups. I see. Jessica White, Director of Terrorism and Conflict Studies at the Royal United Services Institute think tank in London, that sounds like a made-up title, England, said counter-extremism and intelligence researchers have long known extremist groups seeks new recruits through video games, like Hearts of Iron. Her research has cataloged more than 100 games believed to be made by extremist groups, ranging from shoddy knockoffs to sleek custom games. Wow, 100 games in a god only knows how many years long study. I wonder if we put this into perspective. Oh, that's right. There was about 1,758 releases on Steam the last month alone. In fact, just today, 13 games releases. And I want to point out as well, 100 games believed to be made by extremist groups. Holy heck. The far right is lazy on the gaming market, as this makes up something like a 0.something 000 percentile of the games. God, they must have gone out of their ways to dig these up. Extremists are like everybody else. They play games. They are gamers, said White. They probably enter into this by happenstance, sometimes because that's their hobby. White's research was partially funded by a $317,000 grant from the Canadian Department of Public Safety. Partially funded. Partially funded. $317,000 to identify 100 games that might be made by extremists. This is an expensive fucking study. Which then Minister Dominic LeBlanc said will help strengthen Canada's resilience and increase our capacity to identify and prevent radicalization to violence. Then Hearts of Iron 4. Public Safety Canada didn't respond to questions about ITAC briefing note or how serious a potential threat Canada thinks modifications like the Fire Risers really are, because if they were to offer that explanation, it would probably go something along the lines of, listen, she's a friend of the family and this is obviously a slush fund. Please move on with your lives. We thought we made it so utterly ridiculous as to be beyond belief, frankly. White said there's a simple reason to be concerned. Many people play video games. In 2022, an industry surveyed 53% of Canadians had played a video game sometimes in the previous 4 weeks. And judging by your own statistics, the percentage odds of them having happened across an extremist video games is in the order of, you'd have a better chance winning the actual fucking lottery. White said extremists may make video games normalize or introduce political rhetoric for their cause. The Shiite Muslim group militant group Hezbollah, for example, invested significant money to create a video game called Holy Defense, one that White acknowledges is actually well made. Yeah, I've seen that video game. If that is a doctor, professor, or whatever the hell what standard of a well-made video game is, well, let's just say that the era of AI is going to bolster that number quite significantly. In some cases, White says extremist groups will monitor online forums and chat boards for people sympathetic to their cause, then approach them online. There are cases where we can see what extremists are particularly trying to recruit or find eager members out of some of these gaming communities, White said, refusing to provide any actual examples to any of this. It is not clear exactly who made the Fire Risers, what the sympathies are, or if they have connection to far-right extremist groups. Oh my. Okay, well, maybe we can help out here. Perhaps there is something we can do to aid White in identifying whether or not this is a video game made by an extremist group and therefore worth adding to her $317,000 list. We can look at the Steam page, for example, and see if there's something like, oh, there we go, a disclaimer. This mod does not endorse any of the extreme ideologies that are depicted in the mod. This mod simply for entertainment purposes. This mod also does not work on Mac or Linux. Frankly, that latter part is probably the most important of all of them. And do we perhaps have some other explanations for why they present these things in a good light? Let's see here. I believe they wrote in this, all factions within TRF are real-life organizations are closely built to mirror certain groups and are represented as that organizations would view themselves. You play through will always present you as the right side of history, just as these groups believe. Wow, imagine that. See, one would think that it would perhaps be a little bit annoying to pick the far-right group going like, okay, that sounds spicy, and then having the first pop-up going, oh, you picked the silly Nazis, oh, you filthy extremists, you. Be prepared for every pop-up thereafter to call you a fascist idiot and point out how terribly wrong you are. Meanwhile, if you pick the Black Liberation Army, will be presenting a different narrative. No, the point here, of course, is these groups do genuinely believe what they believe, either through simple mass indoctrination, on the left, or by looking around and going, oh wow, things are getting spicy out there, as in many cases on the right. But Trenton said the game itself is an indication the creators likely sympathize with violent far-right groups. Yes, the people who added in the American People's Liberation Army definitely sympathized with the far-right groups there. And said the various units said far-right factions that used gameplay in the game had significantly more detail and tension than leftist factions. I don't think I believe you, Zach. He also said the game's appeared fixated on what he called the culture war issues like transgender rights, something that he also believes speaks to the perspective of the modification's creator. It just sent more alarms to my head because it's kind of rubbed me the wrong way how they're portraying other right-wing stuff in general. Alright, yes, the culture war, also something that is definitely not currently going on and would have no place in a mod depicting the events of 2020. Listen, and of course we can then move on to basically the attacks on the creators, etc. We know this song and dance here. You begin by pointing out, oh, this is very dangerous. We have an expert. We've paid her $300,000 to come up with this opinion. And then we approach the developers themselves and go, do you believe that your video game is a breeding ground for extremism? And if so, what are you doing about it? This is the 2014 playbook all over again, but I just don't think it's really gonna help anymore. Not to mention a game like Paradox Interactive. Now, granted, Paradox is already a bit of a woke company, and has also made various steps in the past to not touch upon sensitive topics in their Hearts of Iron series, shall we say, but I don't think you're going to be able to score any culture war victories here, which also, of course, makes it rather fascinating that you mention it too. He said he raised concerns about the modification on some online posts. In return, he received threats. I got told to kill myself a few times, Trenton said. As you can't say that on YouTube. But, Trenton, if you go on a place and go, hey, you're Nazis, expect pushback. Because in all due likelihood, you're not actually going to be finding a whole lot of Nazis there. The IGF attempted to contact the moderators and designers of FireEye through an associated email address and YouTube channel, but received no response. Paradox Games, Swedish company, created Hearts of Iron Fall strategy game, which FireEye's modification said it has no control over modifications content. Yeah. Listen. We must approach the end of this lunatic era. Now, we really do. And I think we actually are there, more or less. The simple fact that Paradox basically responds with a shut up, and everybody else simply ignores them. Well, this is the kind of tactic that would work 10 years ago, but we're not there anymore, in large part due to those culture war concerns. violence. It is obviously ridiculous to think that Hotavaran is being used as a radicalization tool, specifically for a mod that yet again includes such factions as the American People's Liberation Army. And if we were concerned somehow that again, the 30 to 40-year-olds core demographic audience of Paradox Interactive's real-time grand strategy game Hearts of Iron 4 was somehow susceptible to this propaganda, I think we have worse things to worry about on the left-wing side on this, as again, the left tends to be far more doctrinally heavy, shall we say, to the point where certain mentions of words like transgender issues rings alarm bells in the head of people like Zach, who've already gone through the full indoctrination process. The lesson of all of this remains incredibly simple. Don't spend $317,000 on this nonsense when you have perhaps other things that you could spend the money on, you know, instead of worrying about savings of murdering your own populace. Just a suggestion. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.